Black Flag Jiu-Jitsu in Rockford, Illinois, and we're about to be working on some chest-to-back pinning games. Let's get it. That can be outside the arm. It can be to the inside of the head. If we're behind the elbows, we can connect like this. I'm also cool if you're behind the elbows, connecting under both elbows, just like this. If we manage to lock our hands at any point, we're going to try to maintain this connection for 3 seconds. This isn't going to be a 1, 2, 3 kind of thing. Count slow. 1, 2, 3. That's going to give the bottom player time to break these connections. Again, bottom player, first thing you want to do, if I'm behind your elbows, build head height. Look to start trying to stand. If I'm in front of your elbows, build hip height. Try to stand. If at any point I have locked hands, whether in front of his elbows or behind his elbows, and he's able to build hip height, go ahead, Chance. We don't reset here. We only reset once I'm able to bring him back to his knees and hold him there for 3 seconds. Does this make sense? Now both players have a win condition. Bottom player's win condition is the same as last game. The only thing we're adding now is if there's locked hands, we need to break those locked hands within 3 seconds. Does this make sense? Anyone have any questions? No? Cool. All right, let's get started. Yeah, no, they're adapting to it well. They're like really focusing on managing the conditions, and they're being good material.
Stays on task. A lot of people stay on task.
For sure. They're also willing to work. A lot of people are kind of lazy with it, where they're really approaching it with the right intent. What I'm really wanting to see, is them being able to keep their opponent's hands and elbows on the floor for as long as possible. If we can keep that condition, we're going to eventually be able to start transitioning to finishes. If we can't keep that condition, there's very little chance that we're going to be able to do that unless it's speed-based. So, yeah, whether it's from behind the elbows or in front of the elbows, the longer we can keep someone held down, just the more chances we have to score, both with submissions and actual points. So. Yep. All right. Now top player gets to start with their hands connected any way they want. It can be here. It can be here. It can be here. It can be here. I don't really care how you connect your hands. Just make sure you have a head and an arm connected. Now what I'm going to look to do, if you look at Chance's shoulder, a lot of times when people start trying to finish these arm in strangles, they're just kind of squeezing randomly, right? I don't care how you finish the arm in strangle, but what I want you to focus on is getting his shoulder pulled up and then compressed into the side of his neck. So it's not just me randomly squeezing. I need to pull his shoulder up and into his neck. Does that make sense? So create elevation in that shoulder before we start squeezing. Once we create elevation in the shoulder, I want you guys to just focus on creating compression into the side of the shoulder and into the side of the neck until you either get a tap or you get tired and you let go. No, you can just keep squeezing in that case. So, if we're starting here, the thing that we really need to focus on is breaking them down to a hip or to a shoulder before we start looking to compress an arm in. Does this make sense? That's the only thing that's going to change whether we're in front of the shoulder or behind the shoulder. The main reason for that, especially because Chance is bigger than me, if I try to finish an arm in here, do you see how much ability he has to build hip height? And I mean, realistically, just because of the size difference, if he wanted to just raise his head up, he could do that as well. So before I do any of these things, I'm looking to break him down to a hip and to a shoulder. And now I can look to finish. Does this make sense? Bottom player. Because the top player is starting with connected hands, the first thing I need to do is manage the arm on my neck side. I don't care as much about the arm on my elbow side. I need to have 2 hands connected to the arm on the neck side. As I do, I'm going to look at the same thing. I'm going to build hip height, and I'm going to look to disconnect. Does this make sense? Any questions at all?
If we disconnect and end up back in guard, would that still be like a valid reset?
Yeah, still a valid reset. Does that make sense? Did everyone get that? Sweet. All right, any other questions? No? Cool. All right, let's go.
Build height, guys, wherever you can. Build height.
Jump, Jeff! Jump! It's the only way.
I literally squatted Andrew up from the floor. I don't know if you caught that on camera.
Oh my God.
You're going against a super broad guy, or whether you have shorter arms yourself, it's going to be way more important to bunch their head and that shoulder together. So before I look to start transitioning to locked arms in any other way, I really need to make sure that I'm bunching his shoulder into his neck. What this does, if you look, when my shoulder is extended like this, there's a lot of space here that you're gonna have to reach through, right? So go ahead and reach through. So if I keep my elbow wide, he's gonna have a much larger space that he needs to close up. If he can bunch my elbow in, now there's barely any space that he has to close off there. Does that make sense? Sweet. All right. So we're going to start in the same position. So locked hands in front of or behind the shoulders. The only difference now is if at any point, if you'll notice in the last game, one of the most common responses to having your shoulder put into your neck is to go super wide, like we just talked about. If at any point this happens, what we have to realize is they're exposing themselves to naked strangles now. So the more this arm in strangle disappears, the more this naked strangle appears. If I'm here or here, and I start trying to break him down to a hip, and I'm trying to get his shoulder into his neck, and he's going wide, the naked strangle again appears. Does this make sense? Sweet. Bottom player, your win condition is the exact same. So we need to separate their hands. We need to build hip height. And that's going to be what allows us to win. Does this make sense? Do you have any questions? No. Okay, cool. Any questions? So now we just worked, anytime that we lock our hands around a head and an arm, we call that a loop, okay? There are less effective loops where we can just isolate a single limb. So if there's a point where I don't have his head in, this is an okay grip, but the issue anytime that we only have a single limb is that it doesn't stop the rotation issue. If I have a head and an arm, he's gonna have a really hard time rotating out to escape. If I have a single limb, chance you can just start trying to rotate in any direction, he's gonna be able to rotate out. Does this make sense? So something that becomes super important whenever we're trying to control somebody through a single limb is our ability to kind of collapse the space around it. So it's not just important that we squeeze really tight or we're trying to hold on. I need to take up all the space on one side of his bicep and on the other side of his elbow. Does this make sense? What I'm going to look to do is keep my weight over this elbow at all times. My first condition is just to keep him held down. If at any point he pulls his elbow free, I lose. If at any point he somehow manages to build height and start turtling and he breaks free, I also lose. What I'm going to be looking to do is as he's trying to escape, go ahead and start trying to move. I want to try to capture his head any way that I can. You can keep trying to escape. Keep going left. Boom. Captured a head and an arm. I'm not trying to finish. I am just trying to capture a head and an arm together. I can use my legs for this, or I can use my arms for this. But what I'm wanting to do is make sure that both his head and his arm are together. Does this make sense? Bottom player, again, your win conditions. Break connections, build hip height, build head height. Same things. Is this making sense? Cool. What's up?
So you're trying to capture the other arm and the head too?
So whatever arm I start with, I want to maintain control of this arm and capture his head along with it. If I have to, let's say just for whatever reason, he's extending away and I have to use my legs to capture, I'm okay with you capturing the other arm, but I want you to maintain connection to the primary arm. Does this make sense? Sweet. Any other questions? No? Everyone good? All right, let's get started. Guys, whenever you're starting with the arm, their back is off the mat. Try to keep their back off the mat the entire time. If they get their back to the mat, they're going to be able to rotate a lot easier. Yep. Now we're going to be working the same connection, but from the backside. So I'm starting with chest to back connection. I'm not allowed to cover his hips in any way at any point. So I'm not allowed to do this. There's two win conditions. Either I can keep his head and I can keep this connection for 5 seconds. I'm not sure if you guys have ever attempted to keep a head and arm without hooks for 5 seconds, but it's not very easy. The other win condition is, again, I can lift a trap, his head and his arm with my legs any way that I can. Is this making sense? Bottom player, all you're looking to do is either break connection fully in a way that allows you to create space between you and your partner so you can turn to face. Go ahead. Or what we're looking to do is completely reverse position. So go ahead and start trying to rotate out. If we can come up in a top pin, that's preferred. So first method that we can, here, take my bag. First thing is just creating space any way we can, right? I don't care if you end up on top. As you get more comfortable with this condition, as you get more comfortable creating space, I don't want you to create space on the exit. I want you to stay attached to your opponent and just make sure that your head and your hips are higher than theirs as you're looking to transition on top. If I have a low head, if he keeps his head above mine while I'm trying to come up on top, just keep your head higher than mine, okay? You see how this isn't working in my favor? But if I can get my head higher than the limb controlling me, and I can start building head height, he loses all of his leverage even as a bigger player. Now I have the time to transition to a position of dominance. Does this make sense to everybody? Everyone clear on the win conditions? Sweet. Any questions at all? All right, let's get started. So grab a different partner. Try to stay relatively within your weight class. Let's not go any higher than 15 pounds above like your current weight or under your current weight if possible. If not, then just be mindful of the size difference. We're going to transition to open rolls, so there's no more constraints. The thing I do want to see though is as you're rolling today, try to explore those same connections. Try to bunch a head and an arm together, whether it's with your arms or whether it's with your legs. If you're in a top position, try to keep them held down as your first condition. Okay, one thing that I see a lot of is as people get a dominant position, we get excited to isolate a limb, so we start going all in for it. If we do that, that's going to be, those are the worst times where when we get reversed, we're probably not going to be able to get out immediately, right? If we maintain good connections and we keep someone held down, you're going to find that you're going to be able to work over time, get that limb extended, and meet your condition, whether it's, bending an arm, squeezing the neck, whatever it is. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, sweet.